New research shows that the Western diet can destroy a gut cell called the Paneth cell, and there's potential that this damage might be permanent. For me, beating my own AS, I focused heavily on trying to restore these Paneth cells. In this video, I'm going to explain what Paneth cells are because you probably haven't heard of them. I'm going to go into the research and the study and the article that talks all about Paneth cells, and I'm going to also explain why this is super important for ankylosing spondylitis and how it could change your full shift on how you try to get over it like I've done. So here's the study. Western diet induces Paneth cell defects through microbiome alterations and farnesoid X receptor and type 1 interferon activation. Lots of big words there. But let's focus mostly on the supporting article. And the title of this article, Western diet may increase risk of gut inflammation infection. The study in mice and people showed that a diet high in sugar and fat causes damage to Paneth cells, immune cells in the gut that help keep inflammation in check. When the Paneth cells aren't functioning properly, the gut immune system is excessively prone to inflammation, putting people at risk of inflammatory bowel disease, IBD, and undermining effective control of disease-causing microbes. Let's think maybe Klebsiella. The findings open up new approaches to regulating gut immunity by restoring normal Paneth cell function. So, what are Paneth cells? Firstly, it's Dave O'Brien, a gut health specialist in Australia, who has taught me all about these. He's opened my eyes to them. He's explained them, and it was his hunch originally of thinking that all of these diseases, a lot of these autoimmune issues, could be linked to the Paneth cells. It was him that had the hunch. He went into all the research, and he's come to the conclusion that he really does think the Paneth cells could be top of the list of the thing that we need to restore to gain function of our gut effectively. One of the big things Dave taught me was about the Paneth cells and how you want to really focus on what you can do to restore the function of these. And for me with AS and trying to put all my energy into what can we do to beat AS, to have a working body, this is the route I've gone down, and now it's what I help a lot of people do who suffer with AS. This is one of my main focuses. So let me explain what Paneth cells are. So where are they found? They're found in the base of the intestinal crypts, mostly in the small intestine. The main functions of the Paneth cells are, number one, to release antimicrobial peptides like lysozyme to deal with opportunistic bacteria, pathogens, viruses within the gut. Number two, and kind of the same thing, they're the ultimate modulator of the gut, which means they basically are the main things that are going to decide what they're going to let flourish and what they want to obviously keep in check. Main idea being good bacteria, bad bacteria, the optimal ratios. The Paneth cells are the main decider of these ratios. One example of this is how it secretes the PYY peptide to keep in check the more virulent forms of Candida and yeast. The Paneth cell is able to decide the level at which that virulent form of Candida and yeast is kept at. And as you can imagine, you'd want to keep this in check. And finally, number three, Paneth cells support intestinal stem cell proliferation. And the stem cells are responsible for the rejuvenation of the gut lining. So the Paneth cells are the start of this chain here, and they are going to allow the growth and promote the growth of the intestinal stem cells, which will then repair patches of the epithelium. You can then imagine what happens if the Paneth cells aren't functioning properly, and what we finished on just there. If they aren't functioning properly, is the gut lining going to be rejuvenated as effectively as it should do because the intestinal stem cells are now impaired? So leaky gut, you've heard of that. Where does it come from? One of the roots could be because of Paneth cells. Also, as we mentioned in 1 and 2, the Paneth cells are in charge of deciding what bacteria can exist in what ratios. So if they aren't functioning properly, then what can you imagine happening? Certain bacteria, opportunistic bacteria, viruses are going to proliferate more than they should do. In the AS world, let's think Klebsiella. So everyone wants to talk about how Klebsiella is the issue, or there's even just as bacteria is the issue. What you've got to focus on, and it's what Dave taught me, was how it's not that, yes, Klebsiella is the issue, and you do have to deal with that. But let's look at why Klebsiella has become the issue. It doesn't just happen because it wants to. It happens because it's been allowed to. And perhaps a big factor in causing this is that there's been deficient Paneth cells. And this study, the articles, can prove what problems come about when the Paneth cells are not functioning properly. But for me, applying this to AS, it's, well, if we know there's bacterial issues or Klebsiella issues, Paneth cells are a huge part of keeping these in check. Also, let's talk about SIBO. So, Paneth cells aren't functioning properly, so the gut lining is more leaky, as we just discussed, because stem cells aren't functioning as well, so the gut lining isn't being rejuvenated as often and as effectively. We've also got bacterial levels not in check. So let's talk about Klebsiella, for example. Klebsiella can now escape through this leaky gut lining, and it's in higher abundance, not kept in check. So things like SIBO, which it's called bacterial translocation, or chemotaxis, when bacteria moves from a less favorable environment to a more favorable environment, and it can do because the gut's leaky. What effectively is that's SIBO, that's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. That's bacteria moving to the small intestine where it shouldn't be and settling there and causing all the problems, as I was lucky enough to experience for a good part of my 20s. Not pleasant. And the root of it, obviously there's reasons why the roots get there, but the roots, when they are there, is the dysfunction of the gut lining, Paneth cells, I'll keep saying it, and the then resulting bacterial issues that can just do whatever they want within your gut, within your system, and this is when disease then continues. The scientists fed normal mice a diet in which 40% of the calories came from fat or sugar, similar to the typical Western diet. After 2 months on this chow, the mice had become obese and their Paneth cells looked decidedly abnormal. Obesity wasn't the problem per se, Lou said, the main researcher. Eating too much of a healthy diet didn't affect the Paneth cells. It was the high-fat, high-sugar diet was the problem, because obviously the control was a healthy diet. The Paneth cells returned to normal when the mice were put back on a healthy mouse diet for 4 weeks. Whether people who habitually eat a Western diet can improve their gut immunity by changing their diet remains to be seen, Liu said. He goes on to say this was a short experiment, just 8 weeks, in which the mice were fed the standard Western diet. In people, obesity doesn't occur overnight or even in 8 weeks. People have a suboptimal lifestyle for 20, 30 years before they become obese. And this isn't just obese, by this could be just unhealthy or eating poor quality food, whether you get fat or not. It's possible that if you have the Western diet for so long, you cross a point of no return and your Paneth cells don't recover, even if you change your diet. We'd need to do more research before we can say whether this process is reversible in people. So this last bit is maybe the most important part of it. Obviously, I want you to understand the function of these and maybe put more focus on this. But the negative could be negative, and then positive, as I say to a lot of people, is, well, yeah, 20, 30, maybe 40 odd years of living a certain way, certain diet that isn't optimal, or even worse, it's just downright not good for you. There's the standard Western diet, lots of processed foods, lots of poor quality foods, alcohol, smoking, medications, add them all in. If we know that 8 weeks in rats, the Paneth cells look decidedly abnormal, 8 weeks, then what about 30 years? I mean, like you said, we need more research in this, and it's not clear in this one study. But I would take the good guess, as I'm sure most of you would, that I'd guess there'd be more damage, probably more damage. And this is probably what we see for the massive chunk of people that have a autoimmune disease like ankylosing spondylitis. They try the diet, or they've been on diets, and maybe it works at first or works when you're younger, but they stop working. And I see this with a lot of people who come to me, and then they show me their symptom form of the diets they tried, and they're tracking symptoms, tracking what diet, what food they ate that day, and it's just a mess. Especially as they get older, for sure, I should say. Maybe if I saw it in an 18-year-old, I would see maybe there should be a big correlation between better foods and less inflammation. But it's just a mess of symptoms, because perhaps in this case, and the hypothesis let's make, is that the Paneth cells and the other cells that are responsible for keeping the gut lining healthy and keeping you healthy have just gone past the point of return. They aren't functioning properly, no matter how perfect your diet is, no matter how much you follow Paul Saladino and Andrew Huberman's advice and get it all nailed, and you're grounding and you're doing red light therapy and you're getting in the sea and cold water therapy, and the Paneth cells won't recover, which is obviously pretty devastating to think about it if you are going to try and fix it. But it's important to know, because, well, you'd rather know bit like you'd rather know what antibiotics and anti-inflammatories do to you if you are going to take them than not, in my opinion. You want to know what the actual issue is and what you can do to fix it, which then brings me on to the point that is the positive, is that we live in 2025, and although we've done the damage that isn't reversible easily, there are routes to fixing the Paneth cells, and there are proven, documented things that have been shown to fix the Paneth cells. One being they're able to show here that just returning to a normal diet could fix Paneth cells. So you would never not do that. That's your step number one. Stop eating a standard Western diet or poor food choices. Number two, there's so many compound supplements that you can add in a properly structured protocol that are going to support the Paneth cells. Lysozyme is a massive one. That's what is secreted from the Paneth cells to deal with microbes, opportunistic bacteria, but it also works in a loop to also help restore the Paneth cells. Curcumin's massive. Peptides. There's a good amount of compounds out there that can restore these Paneth cells. So when I work with people with ankylosing spondylitis, this is the first thing I explain to them, is that what has most likely happened, we don't need to see bloods or stools because you're sat on a video call of me describing how horrific the symptoms are with AS. We can just assume without question that there's defective Paneth cells. The gut lining's leaky and there's some level of bacterial virus issue. We don't know what it is yet, but there's something going on. We do everything we can to restore the natural defenses of the gut, one being the Paneth cells. Then what comes after, which you would look at, is then, right, what is the resulting problem? Then we start tackling that. Antimicrobials, candida and yeast, have to go after SIFO, negative gram-bacterial issues. SIBO, obviously the big one for me as well, or most people, as I did. You've got a multitude of issues and you've got to do a lot to deal with them. But the first thing being, can you restore the natural defenses? This is the first things I'd focus on. For some people, this first step is much smaller because any step in the right direction is a good one. Some people, you've got to go in quite hard with it. But you've got to understand that you're trying to, obviously we've got to stop the things that are causing the defects, but also have to put things in place to get things working properly again if you want to get your body functioning better. I guess we could go down the line. I've made other reels, you see it on my YouTube shorts, we've gone into what anti-inflammatories do, what antibiotics do. It doesn't look great if you're taking a lot of these and biologics as well, for what this does to the gut lining, what this does to Paneth cells, what this does to intestinal stem cells. It doesn't look great. So you want to look at all these things, and no matter what, put things in place to deal with this stuff. Later on down the line, which people always ask me, is what about strength training? What about exercise? What about yoga? This is all brilliant, and you would put this stuff in place no matter what. Because for sure, any movement you can do that helps, that doesn't cause any more pain, you should do. But where most people come to me is that they can't do anything. And even if it's PSA, psoriatic arthritis as well, can't use the hands. Rheumatoid arthritis, but in ankylosing spondylitis, as I know, SIJ pain means you can't move, can't move the legs at all. So you have to be super careful with it. Put all of your effort into what's going on within your body. And this article, this study, and everything Dave O'Brien's taught me is pretty much, it's showing that this can't be ignored. It can't be ignored, and it could be the thing. For me, it's the thing. If you see my other videos, you'll see how well I'm doing, and obviously I've gone super hard at all of this. And yeah, I guess this is why I can speak so passionately about it, is because I know there's a route out for people that if I'd been able to tell myself at age 21, 22 when I first got the pains, and then all the miserable times I had in my 20s, it's like there is a route out. There is. Take it if you want it, if you're willing to work for it, take the route. I just want to help as many people as possible as I can with it. With these videos help. I've got an ebook that talks through what I do to start with, and also I work specifically one-to-one with people with AS and any other disease, but AS mostly, to help you put things in place exactly that you need to start fixing this stuff. If you've got any questions at all, drop me a comment below. Hope this video helped, and hope I kind of made sense. And yeah, take care everyone. Hope you can get much healthier, get that body working again.